Hello and welcome to the latest in the Leaders with Ambition podcast series. Today I'm absolutely delighted to welcome my guest, Jay Linder. Jay is Director of Communications at Cadwallader, Wickersham and Taft, and he's also the President of the North East region for the LMA, which is something we'll talk about today as well. And today we're going to have a really interesting podcast with Jay, who will take us through some of the different iterations of his career. I love the fact with Jay that he likes to get involved in situations which are getting his hands dirty. So lots of restructuring roles that have gone on in his time. Also, he did take some time out as part of his career to spend time with his family. And there he really discovered again his passion for writing. And that was on a very long train journey with his son when he was in Canada. But it's a really interesting story that he'll share with us. And I think one of the strengths of Jay is his leadership style. So he's going to share with us the importance of how the importance of how he leads through respect and empathy, and how this really helps him create a diverse workforce, which is something that he strives to do because inclusivity means a lot to Jay, and how he then wants to encourage people to bring their true, authentic selves to work. We'll go on to talk about the importance of networking and something that Jay believes that you should be doing from day one in your career. And also, Jay will share with us some of the work that he does with male caregivers as well, which I think is pretty special. So lots of things for us to talk about today. But Jay, over to you to bring your career history to life for us.
Thank you so much. It's just a pleasure to be with you and to share my experiences with the Ambition listeners. And this is just very exciting. So I'm grateful to be here, first and foremost.
Great.
So for me, I mean, I get very reflective at this time of year. We're having this conversation in early December. For me, I share that because I moved to New York City in November after I got out of school. So every fall I get reflective, and as I get older, I probably get a little over emotional as well, just thinking about the journey. But it's been a fun one. I consider myself incredibly lucky. I've tended to follow things that interest me and people who I find engaging rather than a particular set pathway or title. And I don't know. I don't know that I would necessarily recommend that to someone. It worked for me. It was a meandering journey. It wasn't a straight line, but it was an enjoyable one. Even looking back at some of the stressful moments now, I can laugh about it a little bit and definitely feel like I've learned something along the way. But I grew up in Connecticut, which is just outside of New York. I had a wonderful upbringing with all four of my grandparents who were highly influential on my life. I'm the product of an Italian, Ukrainian Catholic mother and a Russian, Lithuanian Jewish father. So in my home growing up, we had lots of spirited debates, lots of great food. And lots of love and laughter for sure. And sure, a little spice now and then at the dinner table, but it was a lot of fun. And for me specifically, on one hand, I had my Italian grandmother who was probably the only one of my grandparents who spoke in her native language, and she would say all sorts of things to me in the kitchen, including teaching me some curse words. I think much to the dismay of my parents. But Nikki,
well, you would love that.
Oh yeah, no, and well, shame on me. I don't remember any of them, of course, but and I think much to the dismay of my children now, my kids are like, "Come on, curse in Italian, Dad." But to me, I think that the most exotic of my grandparents were my dad's parents, and the reason I say that is they had these amazing accents because they grew up in the Bronx. So I was always fascinated growing up, like, where are you from, and how do you talk like that? Because you sound so cool. And naturally over the years in the 70s and 80s, I learned that they're from New York and what New York City meant. And then finally visiting New York as a kid, doing everything from going to Yankee games in the Bronx to Radio City Music Hall at Christmas time. Just triggered a lifelong passion and love for New York. Yeah, it's kind of not that different than I think I see people experience now when I'm walking around the streets and see people sort of looking up everywhere. And I still do that today. So I share that with you because I went to school in upstate New York to Marist College. I studied communications. I wasn't really certain what I wanted to do when I was graduating. And I say that because I had a lot of friends who had focused on public relations. And at the time, the economy was struggling a bit. And everyone who had graduated the year before me that I had an opportunity to catch up with were miserable. They were so miserable. They weren't making very much money. The nature of the work wasn't terribly exciting. They felt ground down. So all I could think about when I was getting ready to graduate was, my gosh, what am I going to do? I've spent 4 years studying for this degree, and now I don't think I want to do it at all. So I thought about my father's parents and their, stressing on the importance of education and finishing my degree, which of course I did. But I would think about them saying it to me in their Bronx accents, of course, which they were, because they'd check in on me almost every other week. And I started thinking to myself, having grown up with my family and then in going to school in upstate New York, befriending many people from the 5 boroughs of New York, I pivoted from what I wanted to do to saying, I'd like a little adventure when I got out of school. So I was much more focused on where I wanted to be. And for me, I had a big goal. My goal was I wanted to try living in the big city and following the footsteps of my family for 1 year. That was my goal. Let me just do it for 1 year. And not terribly different from what I've heard other people tell me since. And the thinking was, and I remember this, and my friends are tired of hearing me tell this story. Thankfully, Nikki, it's only the first time you're hearing it, but, let me do this for 1 year. And when I'm old and gray and crinkly, as I am now, and I have children as I do now, I can brag to them and say, hey, do you know your old man lived in the big city for 1 year? I mean, that was the goal. And that kind of triggered that meandering professional career path. I didn't necessarily feel that a career in public relations was right for me based on what I just shared a moment ago. And I had a job I had an internship at my school in the advancement office studying alumni relations and fundraising. I thought it was interesting. There was a brief moment in time where I thought I might continue in higher education, and that was something that triggered that interest. So actually I wound up...
Interesting, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's because a little bit of Peter Pan not wanting to grow up. I'm like, I'll just stay on campus. This sounds great. I'll just get a job at college, which wound up happening later on. So I wound up getting a fantastic job at the New York Public Library. I'm dating myself a little bit, but for those who don't know the city terribly well, it's this magnificent building on Fifth Avenue and 42nd Street with 2 enormous lions standing guard. Their names are Patience and Fortitude. They were named.
It's iconic. It's an iconic building. How can people not know it?
It really is.
Yeah.
It's for people my age. We know it as growing up as the Ghostbusters building, because that was where the beginning of that iconic movie takes place in the New York Public Library. And I took the job because I had some relevant experience. It paid reasonably well compared to what my friends in PR were making. And they were offering a whopping 4 weeks vacation. So here I am thinking I get to be in New York. I get 4 weeks off. Of course, you never got to take 4 weeks off, but I get 4 weeks off, and this is what I'm going to do. And I did it. I was there for about 2 years. And while there, I focused primarily on corporate fundraising. The library had a new president, and because I was the newest person on the development team, I was assigned to help write his correspondence, and that was my first exposure to writing leadership communications, which is a common thread that I've had throughout my career. Yeah. And while there were a couple of industry initiatives to support the library, which had gone through some tough times. By the time I got there, they were doing quite well. And one of them was this program called Lawyers for the Library. And as a result of that program, I was able to learn the names and faces and managing partners of a who's who of big New York City law firms. And it wasn't unlike growing up and memorizing the starting lineups of a baseball team or who played guitar on my favorite record. It was like, oh, now I was memorizing the names of law firms. I didn't think much of it at the time. But after a couple of years at the library, like a lot of people, you spend, maybe 18 or 24 months at your first job and you want to do something different, something else, make more money. And I wasn't really sure what to do. I sort of looked around at different nonprofits. And I looked at a copy of the New York Times. The New York Times on Sundays was this print newspaper, this thing that you could actually hold and feel and touch and turn the pages of and get ink stains on your fingers and coffee stains on those pages you dwelled on for a long time. And there was an ad for an alumni relations professional and writer wanted for Columbia Law School, which was sounded fantastic. So I thought, oh gosh, here I am. I have a new opportunity to sort of embrace that interest in staying in higher education. And I've gotten exposure to the Lawyers for the Library program at the New York Public Library. Maybe I'll try that. And I got to Columbia Law School, and I got there just at the moment they named a new dean. So just like the library, I now in my second job had a new experience with a new leader. And once again, being the new kid on the team, was told, all right, the dean has lots of ideas about programs and correspondence and persuasive communication. Jay, you go at it. You take it. You have a go at it. And I grew up at Columbia Law School. I was there for 5.5 years, and I had an extraordinary experience learning about really learning about the law firm industry indirectly because they were such a significant, part of the donor pool. And along the way, I kind of learned that there are so many similarities between working at a law school or a law firm in terms of who the constituents are. The alumni are not unlike law firm clients. The faculty are not unlike law firm partners. The students are not unlike the associate workforce. And the business professionals are the business professionals trying to sort it all out. And it was a really cool experience. And I wasn't quite
sure.
What
an opportunity.
Yeah.
Joe, you think about it.
Definitely. I mean, it was something. I hadn't quite considered what it would mean to have that kind of job. And I really enjoyed the writing aspect of things. I loved the leadership communications element of the work. Along the way, I was primarily an alumni relations officer, but then my last year there, I had to go at fundraising. They said, you're going to be the major gifts officer. You're going to be one of a number of members on the team. We're going to do major gifts fundraising. And it was very interesting. Speaking of parallels, alumni relations is very much like marketing and communications. It's one to many. You're talking about the organization, its capabilities, its people, its value proposition. And the development, the fundraising part of it was much like business development. It's very one-to-one. You're growing relationships with individual donors, not unlike client engagement. And I liked doing both for sure, but I really enjoyed the writing aspect of my job. And I thought, I think it's time for me to maybe try something new. I'd been there for 5.5 years. I didn't know that I had any more sort of growth in terms of anywhere to go. And I also didn't particularly enjoy the fundraising part of it as much as I did what I call the friend raising part. And then something crazy happened. I met a girl and fell in love. And the girl I was dating, who's now my wife, was a very successful public relations professional. And she inspired me to revisit the career that I kind of put on hold when I got out of college. The only problem was, not unlike when I was getting out of college, once again, the economy was in really rough shape. This is around the time of the dot-com bubble bursting. I'm really dating myself for that one, but that's what was happening. And I went around the city and got introduced to a lot of cool people who gave me a lot of phenomenal advice, yet not a single one of them said, I'll interview you for a job. So I remember thinking, this is great that I'm getting all this advice. What's it going to translate into? And again, I was talking with my friends who were engaged in PR in the traditional corporate sense, or in agency life, and they still weren't that happy. They were still sort of reading press releases, cubicles, cold calling reporters, and it didn't sound like very much fun. So what happened was I was really inspired by her name is Nikki to really think about
fabulous name, yes.
Right, exactly, to really think about what was important to me and what interested me and what I thought I could do in terms of taking skills that I'd learned and things I frankly just love to do and make it part of my job. So my friends who were engaged in public relations were still quite unhappy. So I thought, all right, well, I'm not going to force myself into that. One more time, this is probably the last time this ever happened in my life. I once again picked up the doorstop that is a Sunday New York Times and went through the help wanted section. And there was an ad that said Wall Street law firm is looking for a writer to join its growing marketing department. I thought, well, gosh, I know plenty about law firms from my time at Columbia Law School. Maybe there's some transferable skills. And I wound up interviewing for a job, and I was the second person hired for a restructuring of a marketing department at a law firm called Strzok & Levan, which was an amazing firm.
Fabulous firm. Yeah.
Fabulous firm. Sadly, it's been in the news lately under very different circumstances. It's coming to the conclusion of its journey. But for me, I had the time of my life there. I learned all about marketing and business development, learned about brand positioning. The department had been gutted and I was part of a restructuring, and I didn't really know that at the time or appreciate it. But what it meant was having an opportunity to be the first person on a project rather than the third or fourth. Having to triage a bit, learning to be comfortable with ambiguity, which I hadn't really appreciated coming from a nonprofit environment. That ambiguity meant, okay, this isn't in your job description, but we need help with something involving a skill set that you have, or frankly, we just need some help. And can you pitch it? So there's a lot of that, which was really cool. And I had a tremendous experience there. In fact,
it's fun as well, though, for you, Jay. As you were saying, you started off and you were dealing with lawyers, law firms, partners, associates, and to actually physically get into a law firm, it was almost like it was destiny for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's some destiny. I think my family would have gotten a good laugh out of that. You were destined to be at that law firm, writing copy all night. But no, but in a way, it was interesting. I'll tell you what had happened. I'd only been there for a few months, and in addition to the department being restructured, the firm was engaging in a brand positioning that involved creating a new visual identity, coming up with a brand new website, and a host of communication tools to help encourage its lawyers to behave more commercially. And again, I'm dating myself, but at the time, there are two big flagship pieces for a new website, which was still the most visible communications channel for an organization at the time. But law firms and businesses in general hadn't necessarily abandoned print yet. And I'm sharing that with you because the other big project I had was writing copy for these enormous coffee table sized books about the firm, its overview, and a series of client testimonials, stories about the firm and the ingenuity and innovation that its lawyers used, and how they all got along so well. And I spent, I think the first 3 months on the job researching and writing a story about what at the time was the largest privatization in United States history. And if not the largest real estate deal, certainly in the top 2 or top 3. And that was the acquisition of the World Trade Center from the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey by a fantastic company called Silverstein Properties. And I enjoyed working on it. I would shuttle from my office in Lower Manhattan over to the Twin Towers 2 or 3 times to tag along with photo shoots, write copy, maybe just be a gopher and go back and forth. And, I'd been on the job for 3 months when September the 11th happened, and I happened to be downtown when that occurred. I was right on the corner of Broadway and Liberty, which, for those of you who aren't familiar with New York City, it's where Zuccotti Park is, where the Occupy Wall Street protests were held about 10 years ago. And it's adjacent to the World Trade Center site. So that was an extraordinary day. And I was, if you watch the news that day, or if you see archives of it, there are people sort of walking out of Lower Manhattan covered head to toe in dust. I was one of those people. And it was a terrifying moment for everybody. I mean, thank goodness that everyone I knew in my immediate orbit was totally fine. Everyone was safe, but it was just an extraordinary experience. And I remember a fleeting moment thinking, well, gosh, my new job, my new career is probably in jeopardy. I'm probably going to have to look for something else to do. But what I immediately realized, what I think despite having been exposed to law firms for years, what I never really appreciated is just how resilient and how agile and how caring a community the legal industry is. And in the weeks and months...
you mentioned to me as well, Jay, didn't you, that actually it really solidified your love and passion for New York City, seeing how everybody came together.
Yeah, Nikki, I'm so glad you said that, because I was sitting here racing through my story and had forgotten that I'd share that with you. That's absolutely true. I was walking, making a walk from Lower Manhattan to where my wife was living at the time, near the United Nations, to see if she'd left, and then ultimately making my way uptown to go home. But along the way, during the walk, I just was watching everyone band together and help each other out and tell each other what was going on. And I remember, I appreciate it now, but at the time I didn't quite understand what was going on in my mind. I was thinking, wow, this city really comes together like that in the moment of crisis. In a New York minute, as they say. And yes, you're right. Thank you for bringing that up. In the weeks and months that followed, man, I fell back in love with New York City all over again through having the incredible honor and opportunity to work on projects that were helping people affected by 9/11. So there were a number of things that our firm was doing in terms of its pro bono work. Having the chance to promote that was exceptional. And then, I think probably about 3 to 6 months out, the firm established what they called the Spirit of New York Fund, which was a fund that was dedicated toward helping nonprofits and small business owners in Lower Manhattan get back on their feet and not only recover, but thrive. We gave away quite a bit of money. And having the chance to participate in that, if I thought I was fully committed to staying in the city, if you can't tell my long-winded story, that one-year experiment was quickly mushrooming into a much longer journey.
Definitely stayed a bit longer than a year, didn't you?
Yeah, certainly. And so anyway, so that was the beginning of my time. But I grew up at Strook. I was there for 8.5 years. I learned about everything you can think of regarding marketing, business development, operations, technology, what it meant to participate in the life of a firm in terms of helping translate strategic business objectives into sustainable, actionable communications. It was great. I thought I would never leave. And then I got a call from a recruiter who I liked very much. And the reason I liked him is that he'd called me previously with a job that just wasn't what I did, wasn't what I was interested in. And I gave him that feedback. I'm like, I really appreciate you thinking of me, but this isn't what I do. And he remembered and he wrote it down. And he called me a year later saying, Jay, I know you're very happy at Struck, but how would you like an opportunity to work for a global platform, which I hadn't done, manage people on a day-to-day basis? Despite having managed very large, multifaceted, complex, and expensive projects, I never had an opportunity to manage someone day to day. And then finally,
Right.
To do it at I think a very different level of responsibility and visibility and compensation. And I learned the firm was Skadden. And this is another recurring theme. The economy was going through a rough time. This time it was the global financial crisis. My wife and I had a 1-year-old at home. And I think most people were convinced I was bananas for thinking about changing jobs. But I did just that.
Very brave.
Yeah, I guess brave might be one word for it. Yeah, I don't know. I think my family had a couple of other adjectives, and they weren't wrong for thinking that way. They're worried about me. But I made the move to Skadden, and I can't tell you what a tremendous experience that was. Again, a brand new leader joining at the time. Among my responsibilities as the leader of the editorial team was to develop and be responsible for his communications. It was also a time when I got heavily engaged in thought leadership. Skadden was among the first firms, I think, during the financial crisis to have this moment of clarity where rather than continue to promote their successes for clients as part of their main client offering, to actually stop and say, no, we're actually going to tell all of you that we're keenly aware of the issues that are keeping you up at night, particularly during this extraordinary time. And here are our views on things, and here's how we believe we can help. And that was my first exposure to forward-looking, specific, actionable thought leadership. And that coupled with the platform of Skadden and working with just incredibly talented people across the globe was an amazing experience. But Nikki, if it's okay with you, I'll pause there for a moment because that happened to coincide with another extraordinary event in my life, which was my wife and I learning that our son, who was about 18 months at the time, after being at Skadden for a bit, was diagnosed with autism. And I took the news quite hard. And after probably a few days of feeling sorry for myself, all credit is due to my wife, we sort of stopped and said, okay, what are we going to do moving forward? What's our plan of action? How are we going to help our son? And I'm sharing that with you because as someone who grew up in work and in the law firm business as a writer and sort of a solitary kind of person, but then had the benefit of being promoted into a new position where I was responsible for managing people, the news about my son couldn't have come at a greater time because I myself was trying to do a better job of learning how to better relate to and communicate with other people, which is a fundamental goal or a tenet of helping young people with autism. It really is about socialization and communication. And the crazy thing is, over the next few years, the therapy that my son was getting at home and then at school that I was furiously taking notes about to help coach him through situations, I found using myself in work situations because I realized how much I needed. So that was. Do
you think it's made you a better leader as well, Jay? Then, because you and I have spoken in the past about empathy as part of being a leader as well, and when you have, when you found out someone's autistic and the amount of support that you do need to give him and you get from other people as well, which is absolutely amazing. But it does make you realise, doesn't it, that people are going through a lot of things in their lives and people rock up and they've got the face on for work and off they go. But you have been delving below that to ensure that you can support your team more effectively. And has that been a reason or a cause because of it, do you think?
Yeah, no, that's very kind of you to say if it's made me a better leader. It's where I guess I don't think of myself that way. I do, but I agree with you. I do think that going through that personally gave me such a greater appreciation for just how critical it is to better understand people and try to meet them where they are, meet them halfway. I mean, we spend most of our waking hours, whether we like it or not, at work. Law firm work can be highly demanding. To me, it was just essential to try to better understand and relate to people. Try to, I think, engender goodwill and understanding. And you mentioned earlier at the top of our conversation together about bringing one's authentic self to work, and I know that's a phrase we've heard quite a bit, particularly since the pandemic. I think authenticity certainly is key. I would also contend that sometimes that authenticity is not necessarily sharing everything about yourself, but I think trying to encourage others to share and be a listener. And that's I think what really motivated me to be a better colleague. And then by extension of being a better colleague, as I found myself in increasing positions of leadership, despite having the responsibility, whatever the job description says, however many direct reports you have, all that stuff, being a great colleague, me is first and foremost in the journey toward trying to be the best version of myself I can be at work, and also invest, I think, in the development and empowerment and fulfillment of those around me. And then, yes, naturally, if I'm responsible for them as their manager or director or whatever the title is, I think that mindset, it's certainly not a magic wand, but I do believe that having that mindset is probably the most effective way of getting toward an achievement of two things, which is getting a lot of stuff done, because we goodness knows we have a lot of stuff we have to get done in our roles. But along the way, ensuring that everyone, I think, is getting the best possible hands-on experience to grow their careers. It is somewhat transactional. A cynic would certainly say that, but I do think there's some truth there. I think, and so I think a lot of the things that I learned with my son while I was at Skadden, which also coincided with me helping start a nonprofit for male caregivers, Nikki, that you mentioned earlier, called Fathers Forum, was also, I think, instrumental. I found myself, the conversations I was having with fellow dads who were going through what I was going through, the conversations that I was having with my son's therapists and teachers, they were all so instructive to dealing with, I think, very challenging situations in the workplace where it could be the pressure of a deadline. It could be different perspectives and backgrounds not being heard or valued. It could be a host of things. I think I benefited greatly from helping my son and learning through sort of his eyes.
I love that. I love the fact that you committed to really the volunteering aspects and elements of it as well. You wanted to really make sure that you could help other people as well and pay it forward, which I think is fantastic. And you talk about authenticity, but it's also showing vulnerability as well, which is really hard for people to do, particularly in leadership roles, and that's really important, isn't it?
I think that's right. And, I know we're sitting here talking about how unique the legal industry is and how different it is. Yeah. I very much appreciate that we have family and friends who do other things for a living in different sectors, different parts of the world, who probably listen to this going, come on, man, it happens to us too. But there is something I think about the law firm industry in that you are, first and foremost, you're in client service. You are working for people who are under incredible amounts of pressure, who have always been quite exacting, who are intellectually curious, who I think work quite hard to be the best they can possibly be at what they do. And sometimes along the way, that unintentionally creates some barriers to interpersonal communication. It creates some barriers to empathy and understanding. And I'd say a silver lining of the last few years of the pandemic is I think a lot of very talented practitioners have also woken up to the idea that in thinking about who they are as a whole person, they are defined more than necessarily by what they do. It's not that they should only talk about going fly fishing or only talk about spending time with their kids. Those things are important to share, but the idea that these things are simpatico, that they inform one another, there's a synergy between how you sort of invest your time in those around you, whether they're your coworkers, family or friends, and sort of how that gets paid back to you. That's just my take.
I think that's a really good point, though, as well. And I think it's interesting when you were mentioning around, you're working with very bright people, aren't you? And the people that you work with as well are really invested in the firm because they want everyone in the business services functions to be as high performing as possible. So sometimes I think it's really hard for business services to set boundaries. And yet you've done a really good job of doing that and also encouraging your teams to do it as well, haven't you? How have you gone about that?
It's funny. It's funny in a way. It kind of happened by accident, I think. It was when I was at Skadden and I learned this news about my son. My team at Skadden, my bosses, they couldn't have been more supportive or understanding, and they were wonderful. But I had a high pressure job, so there were obviously, and everyone in our business has gone through this. There were plenty of think of those moments where it's late Friday night, and you get ready to pack up and go home, and suddenly you get that email saying, "Hey, I've got this thing, and it's due first thing Monday morning. So here are your incremental steps, and here are your deadlines on Saturday, and here's the deliverables on Sunday. And boy, you better stick around Sunday night to turn revisions, whatever the case may be." I remember distinctly vividly going through that quite a few times, but then also having these responsibilities toward my son. And so my son was at this point, now he's a couple of years old. He's in a specialized preschool for kids with autism. And, they had a science fair to the extent that 3 or 4 year old kids can have science fairs. I'm not exactly sure what happened. So, and
amazing.
Yeah, we're going to build a volcano. Are you? You don't have to go to school for that. That happened. That you've done that in my kitchen a few times. So, the science, I remember my son Wiley, his science fair was, it was like at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. And I remember waking up one day and looking at my wife and thinking, I've spent all weekend working. I think my team and my boss will understand if I'm going to stop at my son's science fair for a little bit and then come back to work. And lo and behold, it was weird. It was sort of like everybody around me and the folks that I worked with, the folks I reported to were like, of course, like life is more together. Strangely, sometimes trying to find work-life balance means cutting loose your conventional guardrails on when you think you should be focused on work and when you think you should be focused on family. I'm certainly not saying that everybody should follow that. I also believe in the power of unplugging at a certain point in the day or at a certain point in the weekend, focusing on those things that bring you joy and things that are important to you and the things that you're responsible for. But I do remember that on any given day while I was there, and because it was my first exposure to a global platform, having a day that consisted of going to my son's science fair at 10 in the morning, coming back to work, doing the work, pausing, going home, feeding them dinner, reading to them, going to bed, continuing to go to work, and knowing that if there was someone in Singapore whose attention I really needed, the best chance of me contacting that individual was going to be at 10 o'clock in the evening New York time, right? So it's just sort of like how I sort of rationalized it all. And I'm sharing that with you, Nikki, because what happened several years later is I started on a journey at Cleary Gottlieb, which was also, like Strzok, a restructure. It was a marketing and business development department that had been gutted. And I was one of several senior people brought in to help professionalize the management, to do a brand positioning, which I had done before, to create a visual identity, launch a new website, some very familiar themes popping up again. And I definitely remember part of that journey was being responsible for a bigger team and therefore ensuring that all of them knew that I was invested in their success, that I wanted to make sure they got the best possible experience. And in return, there would be some long nights, there would be a lot of work to happen, but to be candid with them and say, look, I've been doing this long enough now that I will tell you that at the conclusion of our working on whatever project X is for the next 18 months, you will have really developed your skill set. You will really have enhanced your value proposition, and you'll be ready for the next step in your career. I hope it's with us. But if it's going to be at another organization, I'm going to do whatever I can to wish you well and ensure you're supported. And I think people, at least in our business, we're a little taken aback by that. But I feel that kind of honesty and
unusual. Jay, that's so unusual, isn't it? But setting your stall from day one is the best way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, and Nikki, you and the folks at Ambition would know, right? I mean, you're in the talent business. You understand. You hear it through your clients who are individuals looking for the next journey, as well as firms who are trying to find the right cultural fit. And I think that honesty and authenticity about realizing that none of us are in this forever. I mean, gosh, we're like 30 years into aggressive lateral partner movement. The joke that we used to tell people is like when someone would say they were leaving after a couple of years and someone expressing surprise was, hey, like I'm not making partner. I'm on the marketing team. But the people who are making partner are not sticking around. So the whole business has changed. So I don't think there's anything wrong with, I think, trying to be clear about expectations at the outset, because I believe what that does, again, it's not a magic wand at all. I do believe it narrows the gap between what you are promising, your sort of brand promise, and your ability to deliver on that promise. It's what's true for us is certainly the same thing that you see for recruiting materials for new associates, right? There was a time when recruiting materials would say, "This will be your forever job." I mean, gosh, can you imagine a firm saying something like that today?
This would never happen now.
No. Whereas now a firm is saying, "Hey, like, you're going to learn how to be a fantastic lawyer here, and we're going to wish you well no matter where the journey takes you. But hopefully it's with us, but it may not be." So what's true for them is certainly true for us. That was a big part of what I experienced at Cleary, and I was at Cleary for over 8 years, and I'm proud to say that of everything that we accomplished together at that firm, I think achieving a restructuring of a global team, coming up with a fantastic brand positioning, creating a social media presence for a firm that had absolutely none whatsoever. The thing I'm most proud of my time there was the fact that we had exceptional turnover and retention rates, despite the fact that I would say to people when they joined, like, "Hey, look to your left and look to your right. A year and a half from now, they might not be there. Your colleagues might not be there." They stuck around. I think they stuck around because we were pretty sincere about the work that needed to be done. I think open and honest about expectations. And candidly, there was no shortage of, I think, really cool stuff to get involved in. I think there was always an opportunity to help someone get some really interesting experience to augment their existing skill set. Not every firm or opportunity will present that, of course, but this one did. And I feel like we took advantage of it for the better.
But I love the fact that, you start your career in law firm marketing and, you're doing these huge, big brochures and documents to go on coffee tables. And now it's all about social media and how you're going to really help pivot the firm and get the concentration that you need. And that's in a relatively short period of time as well, isn't it?
It feels like it. Yeah, it did go by really quickly, though. Now I'm really showing my age when I'm talking about time flying. But Nikki, you're right. I mean, when it got to the point at Cleary where we needed to develop some kind of social media presence, because we were one of two AmLaw 30 firms that had nothing happening in social media. Now, it's a long time ago. It's 9 years ago now that I'm saying it, but it's not that long ago. Whereas, it was bizarre to think that they had done nothing. And I remember one of the first things I did was to say, I'm not going to sit here and tell everybody what we should be doing with social media. I'm actually going to ask the people in our team who have grown up and gone to college and started school, their jobs in a gig economy and truly understand social media, to take the charge. And we created a task force and we put everybody from all walks of life at our firm on it. And I think the sort of the nice residue of that approach was it really empowered our people, the junior members of our team, to own something and get great experience just by virtue of really thinking strategically about what kind of recommendations they would make to a firm that had been somewhat skeptical. And I'm proud to say that I think we, as one partner described it, we took them from the Stone Age to electricity pretty quickly. And I didn't do that. Nikki, I didn't do that. Our team did that with me just sort of asking dumb questions about how I share things on LinkedIn. So,
well, isn't that the right thing to do as a leader, is to recognize, the people that should be doing the roles and the people that are better at it, and to surround yourself with very talented people. And you're in a leadership capacity, pulling things together and ensuring there's collaboration and everybody's going in the right direction. But you get the people that are most suited and most talented, and which helps them grow as well, doesn't it? So it's that self-perpetuating philosophy of growing a successful team.
Yeah, I think that's right. And sometimes, and believe it or not, sometimes it's not necessarily even about intellect or talent, though those things are wonderful if you have them in abundance. But sometimes it's just, I really do think
it's
that curiosity. It's that willingness to try something new. It's the that comfort with ambiguity, as I mentioned before. I've never, I'm self-deprecating to a fault, but I had no formal training as a writer. If my English professors knew that I was doing this for a living, I think they'd question. They'd be happy for me, but I think they'd think maybe I'd pulled something over on someone. But nor have I ever claimed to be the smartest guy in the room, but because I'm not, I'm often not. It's just really a chance to, I think, recognize what everyone brings to a situation or a project and trying to take advantage of it. So someone might be really talented at something that maybe doesn't necessarily align with their job description, but if there's an opportunity to harness that talent for the greater good, why not? And that's the social media task force at Cleary is a great example of that. We had people who were graphic designers, but knew plenty about engagement and wanted more exposure to technology projects, and it was a perfect opportunity.
Yeah, that's great. And you refound your love of writing when you took some time off to travel with your son, and I think that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, no, I did. Thank you for bringing that up. I'd been at Cleary for 8.5 years. They were about to undergo a second restructuring that would have included the hiring of the first ever chief marketing and business development officer. And for me, I just sort of having some, I think, open and honest conversations with my boss at the time. It just felt like the firm needed fresh thinking and new blood, and certainly a different kind of, I think, global structure. And I don't know that was necessarily right for me. So, I made a brave and not unlike when I made the move to Skadden during the crisis, kind of wacky decision at the tail end of the pandemic to say, I'm going to step away. I'm going to look for a new job for sure. But while I have a chance, I'm going to take my kids to school. I'm going to travel a bit with my family. I'm going to try something else. And that something else was trying my hand at consulting to see if it might be something I might like to do. And I have to be honest, if I can be honest with you about two things. One was, all too often, this notion of consulting was not what I sort of pictured when I would, think about consulting. It was really more, we need some really brilliant copy. And then you're going to give that brilliant copy to the person who's running the account. They're the consultant with a capital C. And the second thing was, I was like, oh, wow, actually, I'm kind of cool with that. It was actually kind of fun to go back to being just the writer. Hey, give it to Jay. He'll write something.
Not have to worry about everything else.
It was great. So Nikki, what you're referring to, just for everyone who's listening, like we were talking together in preparation for our conversation today, I had shared that my son, who's now 15, has a love of travel. He has a love of trains. He's a subway. We live here in New York City. He's a subway enthusiast. Often our journeys will take us to cities he's never been to before, and we will ride the metro systems as best we can. And then I'll probably find something really tasty to eat, because that's what I like to do. And this past spring, we were in Canada. We went to Montreal, rode that metro system to death. And then rather than fly to Toronto, we took Canada's rail system, Via Rail. I think it's called Via Rail. And we took a 6-hour train ride from Montreal to Toronto, the majority of which takes you along Lake Ontario, which is just stunningly beautiful. And but I will tell you that half the time I was looking out the window, but the other half the time, because I had that flexibility as a consultant, I was writing copy for a law firm client. And we got to Toronto. We had a fantastic dinner. We went back to the hotel. My son passed out cold, and I continued writing copy. And I had a brilliant time. It felt reinvigorating to be able to work and have fun simultaneously. And at the risk of sharing too much information, it underwrote several great trips. So it was a lot of fun.
Yes, very helpful as well.
It paid the bills to do, and it paid the bills to do some fun things. But ultimately, while it was great, I recognized that I missed sort of being part of a community, being part of helping build and lead a team. I definitely think that consulting and writing, and probably in my future, maybe when my children are older and out of college, but I knew it was the fun times were coming to an end. I needed to get serious, get back to work. And just a couple of months ago, I had the opportunity to join Cadwalader, which is a fantastic firm. It's my 4th law firm now and 5th job in the legal marketing field. And it's so interesting. It's such a cool firm. But there are elements of it that remind me of Cleary, and remind me of Skadden, and remind me of Strzok, and remind me of Columbia Law School. And I can't quite tell if it's like, oh, they're just like a composite character, or that's just my age and experience showing. I'm not sure which it is, but I will tell you, when we spoke the other day, I was being so reflective, which has resulted in this very long-winded presentation today, because that kid who thought he would spend 1 year in New York, well, I celebrated 30 years in this city a couple of weeks ago. And
I love that. You're not leaving now.
No, I don't think I can. I don't think they'll let me. I don't think they'll allow me to. So yeah, I've got a new job at Cadwalader, and after 20 years in Harlem, my family and I left, and we live in a different part of the city now. We live in a neighborhood called Yorkville, which is right along the East River. So I feel like I've moved here all over again. It's a tremendous experience. And part of that is having the chance to be at a fantastic firm like Cadwalader, which has been around for 230 years. Alexander Hamilton was among its first clients. To be part of just such a storied history of the profession, but be the new guy at that part of that storied history. It's, again, just what I said at the beginning of our conversation, Nikki. I think I'm really like the luckiest guy I know.
I love that. So a lot of hard work goes into being lucky there. And so talk to me about the networking piece, because I know that's something you started to network, or you had to network when you were part of the fundraising back in your day at the British Library then, the New York Library. It's something that you've had to do and you've really enjoyed doing as well. And that led you to the Legal Marketing Association, the LMA, which you are now president for, as we talked about earlier on. So what is it about networking? What's the importance? And maybe share the LMA story as well.
Certainly, yeah. No, I mean, the Legal Marketing Association, or LMA as it's commonly known, I was introduced to it when I first joined Strzok over 20 years ago now. And at the time, being brand new in the profession, and being the second person hired on the team, while there was nothing that was probably going to equal the day-to-day hands-on experience you're getting at your job, being able to complement that by meeting people who did what I did for a living. And at the time, the profession was still, I think, coming together. And LMA at that time was only about, I think, 14 or 15 years old. It was still sort of evolving. And just having the chance to either maybe reinforce that the things you're experiencing, that you're not alone in experiencing them, that others are going through the same thing that you are, to be inspired and get ideas about things that you might do, or candidly, sometimes to get confirmation that there's that thing that friend of yours is doing in another firm certainly wouldn't work with you for a variety of reasons, whether they're good or bad. That was tremendous. And along the way in my career, as I became more senior and more responsible for an investment in marketing and business development talent, I definitely saw the value of re-engaging with LMA, both to, I think, ensure that the people on my team knew that I took their professional development seriously, and also as a way of feeling like I was maybe giving something back a bit to the profession. I raised my hand a few years ago to volunteer with LMA, and I've had the time of my life. It's been great. I volunteered at the local level in New York. Saying local level in New York is kind of a bit odd because New York is just so big, and it does reflect it does reflect a large percentage of the international organization's membership. And then, yes, for the last 2 years, I've been serving on the Northeast region's board. The Northeast region, probably rough guess, consists of maybe about a quarter to a third of the overall organization's membership. It's like nearly 1,100 members. It's quite big.
That's amazing.
From Maine all the way to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We're glad. We're actually really glad we can claim Pittsburgh. Our friends in Ohio tried to take them, but we said no, they're ours. And yes, I've served on the board, and this past year I've served in the capacity of president, and it's been extraordinary. I feel so grateful to have had the chance to try to help, I think, improve the membership experience as we've gradually made our way back toward in-person engagement. But yes, that networking value, I think it's so critical. I really do encourage the people on my team and the people that I get to meet just to try to get to know as many folks as possible, whether you can do it virtually like what you and I are doing together, or if they happen to be in your neighborhood, to go and spend time with them. I do think it's critical. I think it's healthy. I think it's really is, I think, both a learning opportunity as well as a chance to maybe even unintentionally be helpful to others, which I think, when you're more junior, you think, how can someone possibly know or learn from me? I'm new to the job, but I assure you that anyone who's listening who's only been doing this for a short while, that networking is absolutely a two-way street. Mentoring is a two-way street. I don't think it's a traditional top-down thing. We talked about social media before. I've had an opportunity to get to know someone who through LMA who does social media. She's done it at a couple of different firms. I'm amazed at the work she does. So now if I have a question about something, I just reach out. It's like, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help? And I just, the generosity of everyone at LMA in terms of just being willing to share their time and insights is something else. I think that there is a generation of law firm operational leaders who are still a bit surprised that the special tribe that is LMA, shares their knowledge with one another. I think the reaction is always, let me get the straight. You're not telling them any secrets, are you? I'm like, of course we're not telling them any secrets. but we are learning from one another, and we're able to inspire one another. And I do think that the thing that I'm so proud of in terms of serving with LMA is this recognition and reaffirmation that this profession that was pretty much a second career for almost everyone I knew, including me, is now a destination for people as they're leaving school. Mind you, they might be trying it for a few years while they're thinking about graduate school, business school, law school, et cetera. But the idea that now when I go to an LMA event and I'm meeting people who are starting their careers in professional services marketing, specifically legal marketing, it's just such a tremendous feeling. So that's all more reason I would say.
Yeah. Isn't it? That's the thing. It's a profession in itself, and I think the LMA, I think, is an amazing organisation, and for me to see how it operates and how it works, it is so special. Very few associations that really want to share information as much as the LMA does. And as you say, I was at the conference earlier on in the year, and I was at the conference in New York recently, and that you've got rooms full of people that want to share and help each other and support each other and want to mentor each other and sponsor each other. And you just think, wow, this is amazing.
It really is. And the thing that's, I think, so interesting about it as compared to other professional associations is it's truly inclusive. The LMA consists of healthy amounts of people who are in-house at firms, as well as those who are consultants, creative designers, technologists, fantastic people involved in search and placement and career advice like you and your colleagues in Ambition. The fact that we're all in it together and under one tent is pretty cool. And I just think it makes it, to me, it just reinforces the importance of encouraging those in our profession to try it out. We'd love it for people to become a member. That if you can't do that because your firm won't write the check, or because you can't, or you've got other priorities, you work for a gigantic department and they can only pick 3 people, totally get that. We try to offer a wide array of in-person and virtual programming where prospective members are encouraged to come to. And I will tell you, there was a period of time in my career where I wasn't a member, but my firm was incredibly supportive of me going to that seminar in Midtown at lunchtime and reimbursing me for it. And I would take advantage of that every step of the way. And even if before someone even dips their toe in the water in terms of trying an event, just talking with someone who serves on the LMA, like I think one of the things that I didn't know that I would enjoy so much about the last 2 years is speaking with people who aren't a member of the LMA, not necessarily to try to persuade them to sign up, though certainly that's part of the what I feel I want to do and what I probably should do in terms of my job responsibilities as volunteer, but just sharing with them what it's like and letting them know that making the time for an investment in your career, it goes beyond how many hours you're clocking and what your LinkedIn profile says. I think there really is something to be said for building community and engagement vis-a-vis those in your profession. And LMA is a great conduit for that.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, I know there's lots of webinars, but that face-to-face meeting now is amazing, isn't it? After so long in COVID, not being able to meet people, it makes such a difference.
It really does. And I'm very excited about what LMA is going to be doing in 2024, specifically in our region in the Northeast. We are pivoting toward, I think, a much greater percentage of our programming, be it educational or social, certainly social, being in person. So, we're moving away from a monthly virtual learning opportunity to probably several in-person local opportunities at places like Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and some points in between, Connecticut, Long Island, wherever anyone wants to get together. If there's 5 people in Portland, Maine who want to have coffee and talk about, pricing and RFPs, we'll find a way to make it happen.
Love that. All about the networking. So what would you say are the biggest challenges at the moment then within comms, within law firms? What is it that you're maybe having to think about, keeping you up a little bit at night at the moment?
I do think, I think in our business, one of the challenges, one of the basic challenges of what we do is the law firm partnership model can be a challenging one to navigate for someone who's relatively new. So if you're relatively new, I think you have to take some time being a sponge and being a listener in chief just to learn about how things get done in firms depending on the culture or the governance. So that's, I think, at a specific level for an individual who's new to the profession. More broadly speaking, I think while our profession has continued to mature a great deal and provides more value than perhaps ever before, the reality is the law firm industry is continuing to, I think, evolve. And some of that evolution is very exciting. And some of it comes with some not insignificant challenges. I think there remains to be cautious optimism in our business about the demand for legal services, the nonstop, never-ending, I think, pressure in terms of demonstrating value for client fees, and also what I mentioned before about talent. I mean, I think that continuity of talent at a firm and the challenges to that continuity prevents challenges in terms of how we market a firm or how we try to nurture client relationships in a business development setting. You often hear about things, for example, this is nothing new, of course. Succession planning has always been a challenge at law firms, right? I think there's good reasons for that. We're in the talent business, but we're in the relationship business. And when those relationships experience disruption or change because someone is retiring or because a group of people are going from firm A to firm B, I think that kind of churn and disruption is something that we're still, I think, reckoning with. I also believe that while you can't go a day without reading something very exciting about technology and artificial intelligence and every acronym in between that describes the future, I definitely think there's a struggle for firms to articulate what that really means in terms of value for the client. I think beyond maybe a savings of cost, I think it's a bit of a challenge for firms to articulate how that influences and enhances their value proposition. And the reason for that, candidly, is I don't think we have all the answers yet. I think there's almost like an impatience. I think the world we live in is so fast paced that when someone just, if we hear things about generative AI, over the course of a couple of weeks, we just assume that instantly every firm is going to have it figured out and be able to demonstrate specifically to large institutional clients and others what that means for them. No one has all the answers. The clients themselves don't have it. So I think, again, that comfort with ambiguity, the more comfortable you get with it, the more you're able to recognize that we as an industry, and then specifically we as a profession serving the industry, don't necessarily have all the answers, nor do we have a crystal ball. And being okay with that and just knowing that we can be agile and try to solve for now. What does the internal client at your firm need from you now? And then in parallel, what lessons are there to be learned from that immediate need, and how can you maybe make some adjustments moving forward that will enhance the operational efficiency that supports both financial growth and talent investment in firms? I think that's sort of it. Okay, I'm going to contradict myself. We keep hearing about generative AI. I was in a conversation with a firm last year before I started at Cadwalader, and the partners around the table were having these very high tech, very Hollywood ideas about what it would do for them. And they asked me what I thought, and I gave a very practical answer. I was talking about how the right kind of prompt engineering might be able to produce more standardized, harmonized answers that would fill an RFP response bank. So you're not reinventing the wheel every time you're doing an RFP, nor are you just simply copying and pasting from the one you did last week, like that kind of stuff, right? Like the incremental pilot testing of things, and then I think using continuous improvement to assess what's happened. Did that work? Are you using the right prompts to get the right kind of answers, or are you getting gobbledygook? And what does that say about your systems? Like all that stuff. I think that law firms, generally speaking, I don't know. I think it could be just a little bit of an insecurity about not necessarily running their business the way their clients run their business, and therefore they get a little spooked by that. But I'm always like, let's lean into it. Let's find if we can find a way to work together to I think improve what we do as an operation, and that improvement therefore winds up benefiting both the client and then us as we grow professionally and catch up to our friends who are doing what we do for a living in maybe more established sectors. That's all for the better.
I think it's interesting, as you say, most people don't know where AI is going. It's only been a year. I think it was a year last week that ChatGPT was released. I mean, gosh, where's that gone in a year? That's just crazy to think about it, isn't it? So who knows?
I think we can all agree that it's very exciting. There's nothing to be scared of. And I think we're living in an extraordinary time. And
Yeah.
I think our profession and the industry we serve may not. I think it'll certainly still be recognizable. But it'll look and feel a little different. It'll be maybe a little leaner and meaner. The notion that you'll have very large firms and then small boutique firms, I don't know that's necessarily true. I think there's a lot of room in between for firms that are incredibly focused on what they do and who they serve to really thrive. I think these kind of things like AI and others might actually be a leveler in some ways. They might actually be something that a firm, no matter its size and disposition, can really take advantage of.
Yeah. And I listened to a speaker last week who said, AI isn't going to take your job, but the person that knows how to use AI and embraces AI will take your job. And I thought that really resonated with me because there's changes coming. So, I
think that's
scrapping.
I know. I agree. I think that's right. I mean, for me, I think that I was sharing with you a little earlier about how I fell in love with being a writer again over the last year. And sometimes I think maybe I'm looking into getting a certificate in prompt engineering because I'm like, I know what kind of copy I want to work with. So if I can learn how to prompt it right, of course, certainly based on the hygiene and quality of the systems that I'm drawing from, that could be a really cool next step for my career. And then, I won't be approving anyone's PTO time or doing anything managing large teams anymore. I'll probably be back where I started out, like in a dark corner somewhere with a single light bulb.
You might be multi-millionaire by then.
Well, I don't know.
Doing that.
I'm not sure I know about that. I'll just be finding new and improved ways of goofing off of it. But I do think it's very exciting, and I think we should lean into that excitement, not be scared.
Yeah, I agree. And Jay, what words of wisdom would you give to people wanting to either step into any kind of law firm, in the business development and marketing, in the comm space? What are your words of wisdom?
Despite my saying a minute ago that we have matured to the point that there are people who are getting out of school and doing this for a living, I would contend that law firm marketing, much like anything else in life, is not for everyone. And the words that I've often said, and I said this during a conference last year, at the LMA, we had our first in-person regional conference since COVID began. And we had a panel and we were talking about these very issues, Nikki. And someone asked me a similar question. And I said, the answer really has never changed. I really feel like this has to be, you are kind of crazy. I don't know that those are words of wisdom, but those are the words I've used. If you're going to choose something like this, it has to be you're kind of crazy. What I mean by that is, if you are comfortable with ambiguity, if you are okay with the idea of your job description having one sort of set of core responsibilities, but being exposed to and being asked to work on a different set too, if you're okay with the idea of change not necessarily happening overnight, of incremental change with a longer term goal in mind, if you can be patient, I think those kinds of things lend themselves quite well. If you can try to, again, meet people where they are and try to learn and understand what problems they're trying to solve, which, by the way, might yield a situation where you discover that maybe there isn't a problem. Those kinds of things. I think when you think about every legal marketing copy we've ever seen will say something to the effect that our lawyers understand their client's business. So we've all read that somewhere. I've probably been guilty of writing it a few times. It is true. And sometimes it's more aspirational than real. But I think the other thing I would say is that when it has to be you're kind of crazy is you also have to be willing to invest the time to first and foremost listen. And so if you're new to a firm and you are maybe new to legal marketing and it's your first law firm job, to really spend time listening to people and understanding what their hopes and fears are, what their practice is about, why clients hire them, what are they struggling with, what are they interested in doing, knowing, again, ambiguity coming to play, that there is no one-size-fits-all remedy for any strategy or tactic related to marketing and business development. There are lots of different tactics, lots of different things to be employed, things that can be combined. and things will happen at different speeds. I think all of that stuff, to me, while squishy and not necessarily sounding like something that's data driven, are my words of wisdom, my advice to people. It has to be your concrete.
Fabulous. I love that. Jay, I have to say thank you so much for your time today. So many takeaways from your conversation. I love the got to be your kind of crazy. That's going to definitely resonate with me. And also that fact around the networking and investing in yourself, and then making sure that, the sponsorship and the mentoring and the reverse mentoring, there's a lot of takeaways from today. So thank you so much for your time.
Nikki, thanks to you and the Ambition team. This was a real thrill and a pleasure. I'm glad I was able to spend time with you today. Thank you.
Thank you.